Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by Private Reserve, Copper Burst. Now, I was given a bunch of cartridges, but I was so unenthused by this ink that I drained the cartridges into a vial so that I could use the cartridges in other pens. So, yeah, it's a brown. The end. Anyways, the tests were done with this Retro 51 with a fine nib, and this Parson's Essential with a Broad Cursive-Italic Stub. Yeah, so Copper Burst is not copper at all. It's brown. It doesn't even look like a, like an old penny that's, gotten oily and, smudgy. It doesn't even look like that. I say in some of the tests that it looks like the chalky dirt on a baseball diamond. It's a flat, chalky brown. This is Diamine's Ancient Copper, which I love, and which is totally copper. It's amazing. Also, look at how much it shades. That's fantastic. Anyways, then I also compared it to Kiowa Pecan, which I still think looks like buttered toast. They're just delicious looking. And then lastly, as an afterthought, I included Diatramentis's, Private Reserve's Vampire Red, because I also thought that was kind of a weak and unimaginative and somewhat chalky brown by Private Reserve. So I guess these two are siblings. Now, the most interesting thing about this ink is definitely the chromatography, because there is all kinds of weird stuff going on here. But as you can definitely see throughout, there is no water resistance in this at all. It completely flees. There's barely even a trace of where the initial drop was left. Then it goes up into sort of a light brown and then into slightly darker brown. But then in all of these, yeah, look at that. There's this bright blue, and then there's this neon green right at the corners. And it's in all of them. And it's just, it really is this bright in person. It's kind of bizarre. But anyway, so thought that was interesting. Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. As you can see, there's a decent degree of shading in both the fine nib and the broad cursive-italic stub. And for some reason, in all of these tests, the fine nib took longer to dry than the stub. There was, no logic involved. I don't know why. But as you can see here in the scrubbies, and yeah, it looks thin and watery. You get this very distinct change in shading, but I think it makes it look watery and weak in the thin parts, and that's not very complimentary. So here, it's actually much darker on camera, but yeah, it's gone. There are a few little, part of the A, part of the T, but yeah, it's really, really gone. No water resistance there. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where, again, the dry times do not involve logic at all. And again, there's a lot of shading, both in the fine nib and in the italic. But, yeah, I still think it looks, weak and watery. It doesn't, the shading doesn't complement the color or the performance. No bleed feather spread, or on here, either on the Clairefontaine. But here, I think that's almost impressive how gone that water is. But yeah, it's really, really gone. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where something about the color of the ink changed. I hope this comes through on camera, but there's like a real change in the color of the ink on this paper. I guess it must be the cream quality of it, but again, there's a decent degree of shading. Here you get a very distinct halo effect in the wettest parts. You even see it in the writing a bit too, but again, you really get that it looks thin and weak and watery, and I still think this looks like a very chalky, uninspired kind of a brown. Again, that's almost cool by just like how gone that is. And it's really gone here too. But yeah, no bleed feather spread. Not a great deal of show through, but you know, that's a personal preference thing. Now for the next 3 tests, I just used the fine nibbed Tornado. And yeah, it, you know, there's bleed, there's feathering, there's spread. I mean, I guess in a way this is the best water test we've seen so far, but it exploded, it feathered, it dyed the page. And even in this fine nib, we got bleed through. Especially in the water test, but anyways. It's, and again, it's sort of like unimaginative brown. Like if you asked a kindergartner, what does brown look like? They'd pick something like this. So, next is Mead Notebook Paper, and I kind of want to compare this because it did a bit better on the Mead. As you might be able to tell, it didn't spread quite as much. The line didn't get quite as broad. The bleed is patchy, the feathering is patchy, which makes me think it's part of the pressing process. As you can see, it really just sticks to the edges where you see the bleed. There is some echo, but I mean, that's, you know, like that's because you can see the light coming through the paper. But, yeah, you still retain a little bit of shading, which was kind of impressive. Although I don't like the color of the ink, this is really not a bad pen, paper, and ink combo. So, water test is not great, but in some ways it's better than the fancier papers. It's mostly gone, did feather and spread a bit. And last is Moleskine Notebook Paper, which even though this is the new Moleskine notebook paper that I've been using, you know, where there's no bleed, which is weird and probably why I hate this paper. But, yeah, there was feathering. This might be like the first ink I've seen feather on this paper, but, yeah, 7 seconds to dry, which I really can't explain. You get a little bit of shading, but really not much, and it retains that just bleh color. Water test is patchy. Really not great, but yeah, so there you go. Copper Burst. It is not copper, and it doesn't even burst in color. It's flat, it's unimaginative. No water resistance. It really doesn't play well with cheap papers. Yeah, get ancient copper if you want a copper. If you want a brown, I definitely recommend Kiowa Pecan or Noodler's Walnut. But yeah, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.